Welcome back to the Tickford 500. There's the view from the Whitman's Chocolate Lightship here at Sandown International Raceway. The cars all gridded up and ready to go. Mark Osler, let's have a look at the circuit.
Yep, Sandown International Raceway, 3.1 kilometres in distance. Look at those big long straights. That means it's a horsepower circuit, but it's also got very slow corners leading onto the straights. That means you need good power down to get maximum speed on the straights. It's also very tough on brakes, particularly at the end of that long back straight and the end of that long, recently named Peter Brock front straight. Very fast circuit and really a test of transmissions, particularly out of those slow corners.
Well, we've shown you the top 10. Let's show you the full grid now. Peter Brock and Mark Scape, of course, starting from pole position. And row 2, it's Mark Larkham and Andrew Mediki.
Starting out of row 2 is Glenn Seaton and David Parsons in the Ford Credit Falcon, Alan Jones and Jason Bright.
We go back to row 3, Jason Bargwana and Mark Noske certainly opened a few eyes. Greg Murphy and Craig Lowndes.
Yeah, row 4, John Faulkner and Wyn Percy in the better electrical car. Wayne Gardner and Neil Crompton in the Coke Commodore start out of position 8.
We then go back to row 5. It's Dick Johnson, John Bowe, Tony Longhurst and Charlie O'Brien.
Row 6, Larry Perkins and Russell Engel in the Castrol Commodore. Stephen Johnson and the Kiwi, Craig Baird, start out of position 12.
We go back row 7. It's Stephen and Jim Richards, the father and son combination. Terry Finnegan and Peter Fitzgerald.
Out of row 8, Paul Romano and Alan Grice, 2 times Bathurst winner. Out of 15, John Trimble and Thomas Mazera out of position 16.
We keep on going back. Row 9, the 2 young guys, Darren Hossack and Steve Ellery, Trevor Ashby and Steve Reed.
Out of position 19, Mike Conway and Gavin Monahan, the former Formula Ford racer. Bruce Williams and Paul Gover join up in the Sumoco Commodore.
Row 11, it's John Cotter and Peter Duhlman, Kevin Waldock and John Smith out of position 22.
Heading back toward the grid now, row 12, Melinda Price and Karen Brewer, the Castrol Cougars in the Commodore. Malcolm Steniken and Norris Miles out of position 24.
So there they are, just warming up. Glenn Seaton, the newly crowned Shell Australian Touring Car Champion. He lost the race here last year by a mere 1.5 seconds. Barry Sheen, he'd love to be on number 1 again today.
Well, having a bit of problem with Barry's mic there. We'll get back to Barry in a second. Meanwhile, field gridding up behind the pace car. Very wet, slippery conditions, as you've seen in those preliminary races earlier on in the telecast. Some of the portions of the track have been resurfaced, particularly coming up here toward brakes, under brakes I should say, for Shell Corner. New bitumen laid down, a little bit of oil coming out of the bitumen compound. It's making the track very, very slippery, so we're looking at a start behind the pace car.
The conditions just atrocious. We go on board. There is John Bowe. So that answers the question of who is starting in the number 17 Shell Helix Falcon. John teamed up with long-time partner Dick Johnson. Looking forward to a great race. They've won here at Sandown in the endurance race, the 500 2 times, 94 and 95, back-to-back. You're keen to get number 3 today, Mark.
Indeed, we understand from race control. This is the official first lap of the race. Just waiting for confirmation on that, but this is a quite unusual thing. Australian spectators may not be used to this, but they do it quite often in Europe. When conditions are treacherous enough, they don't want a whole standing start in a field of 25 cars piling into that first corner under slippery, wet conditions. They start them off under the pace car. 1, maybe 2 laps to get the field very used to the conditions. The pace car will pull off and the race will be underway.
The Mitre 10 Falcon, Mark Larkham, he's extremely excited to be starting off the front row of the grid.
Well, it's about time. You've got a bit of good luck when you think about it. You know, it's really the sensible thing to do to start this race behind the security car, safety car, because the way conditions are, you can imagine if they did a standing start, everybody would be all over the circuit, and more especially going into the first corner, you'd have 24 or 25 cars going in there and about 6 coming out.
Exactly. And as we've seen in some of the support races, it was just absolute mayhem when they hit Shell Corner.
Yeah, it has been pretty difficult, but the V8 supercar teams have all had a chance to see those support races. They know how slippery it is out there. Good call on the safety car.
I think this morning in practice, Greg Murphy said he went into the first corner and it was just as if the steering had broke. You know, he turned in and it just completely straight unsteered directly off the circuit. He was the first one off and there was about 9 cars went off on the first corner.
Likewise, Neil Crompton, just talking with Neil earlier, and he said it's just you turn the wheel and nothing happens. You just keep going straight ahead. Very slippery and slick conditions. On board with John Faulkner in the Better Electrical Fisher and Paykel entry. He's had a sensational Shell Australian Touring Car Championship this year. Of course, top privateer. Now he gets into the Enduros. What can we expect from the Melbourne-based driver?
Well, it is hard to get used to, folks, but one lap. The first lap of the Tickford 500 has been completed. This is a race, but they're just sitting in behind the safety car. They're now starting their second lap of the race. Very, very slowly, finding their way around, but we'll wait to get the word from the clerk of the course to say that the drivers have checked out the race conditions. They are safe to start the race. Drivers weaving backwards and forwards, trying to get as much temperature into the tyres as they can.
Barry brings back memories of the Hungarian Formula One Grand Prix just a few weeks ago.
They come up toward Holden Hill, the back straight. Cars reaching 250 kilometres an hour in the dry conditions. Kalari on the helmet there tells you that's Mark Noske. The lights have come off on the safety car. No. So we're going to go back to racing, full speed racing, by the time the safety car comes around past the pits this time around. So the crowd getting all pumped. They're ready for some action here. Mark Larkham, his best starting position in V8 Supercar, and boy, what a time to do it. Tickford 500.
It's going to be interesting, the first corner, because don't forget the guy's been around her a couple of times now, but it's one thing going around behind a safety car. It's another thing coming down the straight at sort of 230, 240 kilometres an hour, and then getting on the brakes and trying to turn into the first corner. So have a good look on the first left-hander.
So lights are off on the safety car. That should peel off into the pit entry lane now, as he brings them on to Peter Brock straight. So there he goes off, and now we're going to come up to racing. Cars should hold formation. See them squirming under power. There should not be any passing until they cross the start finishing line to complete 2 laps and head out on their 3rd lap of the Tickford 500. Away they go. Peter Brock will leave the field. How appropriate is that, his last appearance at Sandown?
First time into Shell Corner under full race conditions in terms of not going behind the safety car. There's already a challenge for 3rd spot. Alan Jones moves through on the inside of Glenn Seaton to take over that number 3 spot. They all sort themselves out on under very, very treacherous conditions. I'm sure we're going to see plenty of action. And Larkham has already moved up onto the back of Peter Brock.
So Brock brings them onto the back straight the first time around. Big string of cars. Larkham, Seaton, Jones, Noske. In the Young Lions, Commodore, Murphy, Faulkner, Gardner, Johnson, Longhurst. Rounds out the top 10. Lights punching holes through the spray. Still pretty difficult conditions in terms of visibility. There's Alan Jones. Glenn Seaton settling in there in the second. The Mobile Holden Racing Team Commodores.
Yeah, Jones is putting away from Seaton pretty quickly. Look at the gap he's pulled in just, what, 3/4 of a lap.
Going very well. It'll be interesting to see a driver change around about lap 50 or so, with Jason Bright getting into the car, because when Jason had his very first V8 Supercar race at Symonds Plains in Tasmania this year, he filled in the Gary Rogers team for Stephen Richards. He drove there in wet conditions, Mark, and if you remember, he drove just brilliantly.
He certainly did. Impressed a lot of people. On Shell Helix camera.
It's a heavy position for Jason to be in, because you can imagine if AJ's in a really good position and Jason goes out and does anything that he shouldn't do, you'd hate to bring him back in, wouldn't you?
That was the decision of the Shell team. It was between John Bowe and Dick Johnson. I believe it was dry conditions. Dick was going to start. If it was wet, it was John Bowe's turn. So John drew the short straw on that one. But he's doing a terrific job just sitting in there in the completely re-engineered Shell 17 Falcon. Car rebuilt. It was actually the number 18 car that hit the wall at the AGP meeting earlier in the year, but they've done a number of different re-engineering tweaks in the car. Particularly, you see where John Bowe's seating position is very rearward. He's almost got his head alongside the B pillar of the car. They've done a little bit of re-engineering on the car, and it's going pretty well.
Right behind this, have a look. It's the Castrol Ford of Tony Longhurst. These two guys, Longhurst and O'Brien, have just been dynamite in the wet. They were the quickest in the session. We go back on board the Shell Helix in-car camera with Bowe. Look up the inside. No, Longhurst brings it back inside. He is on fire at the moment.
Yeah, it's a 500-kilometre race.
Wow.
Slippery tracks. Tony Longhurst really pushing hard. So John Bowe,
up the inside.
I think John Bowe actually gave a bit of racing room there. He doesn't want to get involved in that sort of cut and thrust this early in the race. 500 kilometres, it's a very long grind around here. Tony Longhurst was really on the charge. Well, there you go, Tony. You go for a charge on your own, according to John Bowe. So the Castrol Ford running very strongly. Peter Brock still in first position. Mark Larkham hang on in second. Jones in third. Seaton fourth. Murphy, Gardner. This battle. Now Longhurst moves up to 7th, Bowe back to 8th, Noske 9th, and Larry Perkins moves up to the top 10.
Talking about Longhurst's teammate in Charlie O'Brien, he hasn't been in a V8 Supercar for quite some time, but over the last couple of months he's been putting in some pretty hard training at the Lakeside track in Queensland. He's probably done about 50 laps in Longhurst's car. We have a look here. It's Murphy making an inside move on Seaton. Seaton doesn't argue at all. He says, just to make your way through there, Greg. I won't fight that one.
That's the thing, the mentality in a race like this, whereas normally if we were looking at a Shell Australian touring car round, somebody try and close the door. There's a totally different mentality in the endurance race. You think, I don't want to let him up the inside, but you've got everything to lose and nothing to gain.
Go on
because
board.
at the end of the day, they're just going to say you're stupid.
Windscreen's O'Brien on board camera. You're riding with Glenn Seaton in 4th position. It's Alan Jones up ahead in the spray. Glenn was having a bit of trouble getting the setup right on the car, which is quite unusual. Normally the car is beautifully balanced, a good handler. They're just having a bit of trouble dialing the car in, particularly riding over the bumps here at Sandown. But he said the car has been getting better. And now we've got wet conditions. That's another variable for the Ford Credit team to cope with. The car looking pretty strong in these opening laps.
Talking with Tony Murphy, team manager of the Ford Credit team yesterday, and asked him just how much different the car is from...
Jonesy!
Now he's picked up a whole heap of grass there on his air intake. Hopefully that'll fall away. Yeah, most of that's fallen away, so it hasn't gone into the intake, which can all cause all sorts of dramas. But Jones managed to get on the track. It doesn't look like the underbrake is damaged.
Where's Lark?
We're keeping an eye at Larkham.
2 Mobile HRT cars there, weren't they? One after another.
Larkham is in big trouble. We're watching. He slipped down the order. He hasn't come across the start-finish line yet. He has.
I think I caught a glimpse of when we saw AJ just in the top right-hand corner. I'm sure I saw Mark Larkham's car.
Holden Racing Team 1-2. Just see Alan Jones sneak up the inside of Wayne Gardner. Check it out on our Shell Helix race score. That's the leaderboard. Peter Brock in 05. He's built up a 7.8, almost 8-second lead over his teammate Greg Murphy. Glenn Seaton in 3rd position. Gardner was in 4th. Jones has just taken that position, but Gardner now back on the attack in the Coke Commodore. Longhurst and O'Brien in 6th. Bow back there in 7th. Perkins in 8th. So a great battle here. Alan Jones on the attack, just went right across the grass. Managed to get back in. Doesn't look like it's affected his speed at all.
Let's have a look at that on a replay, that earlier incident with Alan Jones. There they are, the teammates. They just both go off onto the grass. Larkham is spinning around. Jones has been able to continue straight on, and, well, it looks like that Larkham has parked it there because he certainly didn't come across the line. It didn't trigger on our computer screen, and he would be desperately disappointed with that.
It's funny you see the 2 cars in. I saw a glimpse of Larkham, and I thought, no, it can't be. It's that's sad.
Well, Larkham's just tripped the timing beam there. He's come across in 15th position, so he is back on the circuit. But boy, oh boy, that guy's had some wretched luck this year. Fancy being involved in an incident with your teammate. Look at Tony Longhurst on the attack. Under brakes, he really is charging in the Castrol Ford. Sneaks up the inside of Wayne Gardner in the Coca-Cola Commodore.
Longhurst on the attack, nice and early. We've seen him just creeping up through the field. He qualified 10th. He is now up in the 4th position.
I seem to remember coming together there with Gardner in the earlier Sandown.
Yeah, in the Shell Australian touring car round, he and Murphy came together there, and Gardner spun off. There you have it. It's Murphy, then Seaton.
Oh,
Brocky.
0-5. Now, I've got to say, all through practice, this car has been haunted by some sort of electrical gremlin in the car's engine management system. Jeff Gretsch had his fingers crossed all the way through practice that they'd be able to find the problem. Let's go down to John Smales.
I'm with Jeff Gretsch right now. We're pushing Peter Brock away and out of the race. Jeff, what's wrong?
We've got something wrong with the throttle cable. We don't know yet until we get to have a look at it. Is
it possible to get it back in the race?
Oh, well, we'll try to, but until we get off and see what's wrong with it, we won't know.
Well, that is just so disappointing for Peter Brock and Mark Scaife. This was, well, Peter was looking at win number 10, and it's certainly not going to happen now. Well, we won't dismiss it straight away, but it's very unlikely that it's about to happen.
When you think of all the modern technology, telemetry, etc., microchip this and that, and then a throttle cable. Look at Longhurst.
He's on the attack again, up the inside of Jones, and he gets up the inside. And the double whammy. He toes Jones through in the Komatsu Ford.
So Tony Longhurst is up into 2nd position from 10th. We're only on lap 7. From 10th up into 2nd position. He's out chasing after Greg Murphy in the Mobile Holden Commodore. Alan Jones is staying nice and close to him. The Fords are doing very well here at Sandown.
Absolutely.
AJ's definitely got the race face on today. There's no doubt whatsoever about that.
Tony Longhurst is just on fire. He's teammate Charlie O'Brien has been doing comparable times. He's been pretty much level pegging Tony with the time. So this team, the Castrol Ford team, are looking nice and strong.
Well, that moves him up to second position. That dynamite move on Glenn Seaton. And Greg Murphy in car 15 up ahead of him.
Oh, look up.
Yep. This shows how wet those conditions are. As soon as the weight gets off that inside tyre, it locks up very, very easily. It's a real great battle here.
Going backwards, yeah.
He really is. He's slipping back through the field. Just looking at his time, 1:26.5. Longhurst, the fastest man on the track at the moment, at 1:24.8. So the Castrol Ford, as Longhurst promised throughout the very disappointing Shell Series, by the time we get to the endurance races, keep an eye on us.
Tell you what, also keep an eye on Stephen Richards. You can see him there right behind Glenn Seaton. He qualified in 13th position and is already up into 9th. So Stephen Richards teamed up with his father Jim for the Tickford 500 this year. They're going very well. They're inside the top 10. So there's been some quite big movers forward. Perkins, you can see there, just coming round Shell Corner now behind John Bow in the 17 Shell Helix Falcon. He's worked his way up from 11th up into 6th position. Here goes Bow having a look on the inside of Gardner.
Feels like Wayne almost let him through there. We're getting involved in this cut and thrust. Probably the team manager on the headset saying now, cool it, Wayne. We've got a long way to go yet, buddy. So it's Murphy in charge, last year's winner.
Let's have a look at the Shell Helix race score. It is Murphy and Lowndes who lead the way. Longhurst and O'Brien, they are really charging on. The combination of Jones and Bright. Gardner Crompton sitting in 4th position. Johnson and Bow. Let's have a look back, 6 through 10. It's Perkins. Then we go back to Johnson, Seaton, Stephen Richards and Bargwanna. More on Network 10 after this.
Welcome back to the Tickford 500 of 1997. More than 160 laps in store, but after only a fraction of that, we've had incredible action. Murphy in the HRT Commodore has charged from 6th on the grid to lead the race. Longhurst has come from 10th on the grid to be 2nd, and Peter Brock, the man of the moment, the man who's been revered here today, is in big trouble.
The Coca-Cola Commodore of Wayne Gardner is sitting in 5th position at the moment. There he is, the chief behind the wheel. He had some problems earlier on. Larry Perkins is looking for a way past. He ducked out behind. Thought he might have gone for the inside move there. And then sitting right behind, it is Johnson Jr. Stephen is forcing the issue with Larry Perkins.
You can see the guys are starting to get a little bit more aggressive now. They can afford to. It looks like the rain stopped and there's a very slightest hint of a dry line emerging. That's being reflected in the lap times too. They brought it down. They're now running in the 1:23 bracket. Murphy just on a 1:23.7. Stephen Richards very quick too. He's back in 8th. So the track is starting to dry out a little bit. Look at this attack on the inside by Perkins. Not quite enough real estate there. Ducks back in behind Gardner, so he gets on that drying line. But you can see the track starting to dry out. These drivers will be hoping that the weather continues to hold. John Smales.
You can't believe the disappointment and disbelief that exists in the 05 pit at the moment. Brock is in the car. He won't get out. He's got the belts on. The team is working around the car trying to fix it. Mark Scaife, what's happened?
Well, look, we think it's done a throttle cable or the mechanism at the end of the cable, but it's a silly thing. I mean, these races are like that, and you've got to have a little bit of luck on your side, John.
But you've got a smile on your face. You're not feeling it, mate.
Oh, well, I mean, what can you do? This is the game we play, and in the end, we'll get back out there and press on, see what happens.
There's a great battle going on between 3 cars. It is Larry Perkins has finally worked his way past Wayne Gardner. He's got Stephen Johnson in. And speaking of the Stephen Richards is coming storming up behind Johnson. Now Johnson looks for an inside run on Gardner. Young Stephen Johnson has teamed up with Kiwi Craig Bedd, and they've been getting faster and faster all weekend.
Yeah, it's a terrific scrap. We just saw that when we cut to that interview with Mark Scaife. Perkins muscling through on the inside of Gardner. Now he's coming under attack from Junior Johnson. And Stephen Richards in the Valvoline Cummins Commodore. I saw this car was very quick in the opening laps of Bathurst last year until they came unglued in those very wet conditions and put the car into the wall. But there's no doubt about its speed. And it's a very strong, small, very tightly knit team under Mike Exel.
I tell you what's going to be interesting is when the track starts to dry out. As you can see, it's getting a bit of a...
Oh, Larry Perkins!
Dear me. Shows even with a wealth of experience you can still do it. Yeah, it's going to be interesting to see when the track starts to dry out. The car of Longhurst and Gardner on Yokohama tyres, and traditionally, look at see when you go off in the dirt like that, it fills up the front air dam. As soon as you get on the brakes, they all come out. It all comes out again. Gardner.
Big attack here from Stephen Johnson. He got a great run coming out of that corner onto Brock Straight. They'll go virtually side by side under brakes into Shell Corner. Johnson is better, but then... Wayne Gardner gets a little wiggle on under brakes, just kisses the panel, front panel of the Shell Helix Ford, but managed to survive unscathed. That's cost him time coming out of the corner. Now Stephen Richards tries to take advantage in the Valvoline Cummins Commodore to see if he can muscle his way too. Gardner getting attacked from both directions.
Well, just seeing there what Stephen Johnson was made of. Gardner just testing the young guy out a little bit. Stephen Johnson held his own quite nicely. He moves through now, one position better. He's up into fourth. It looks like this. It's Murphy. Longhurst still in second. Here comes Stevie Richards in the Valvoline Cummins Commodore right up the outside of Wayne Gardner.
Look at that, side by side as they crest the rise, still well over 200 kilometres an hour in these wet conditions. Richards up the inside, sticks it back to fifth gear, and I think he's just got inside Wayne Gardner. Larry Perkins now with all that work to do to get past our 1987 World 500cc champ Gardner. So the order now, Murphy, Longhurst, Jones, all. Richards goes a little bit wide, gets right out on the ripple strips on the outside of the corner. That cost him time. Gardner comes back on the attack. So tremendous scrap here between Gardner and Richards.
Gardner has a look up the inside, couldn't quite do it there. Pulls back in behind Stephen Richards. This is so encouraging for the Richards team. They started 13th position, and Stephen is now up there, well up there inside. He's up in the 6th position now, doing very well. I had dreadful luck last year here at the Tickford 500. Perhaps this could be Stephen and Jimmy's year.
Blasting through the spray, former Australian Formula Ford champion Stephen Richards.